Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Hello, Karen.
Good morning. How you doing, Dan?
I'm good. Had some nice days as far as weather goes last week.
Right? That nice 70-degree February weather. Yeah.
Yeah. We talked about how that is confusing to not only the peach trees, but to me as well.
Oh, yeah.
But I probably enjoy it a little bit more than the trees do.
Oh, yeah. Well, at least you can put a coat on,
Or take a coat off.
Once it gets cold again. But it was nice to get outside and get a little extra vitamin D. I will not deny that. I do love me some nice sunshiny days. We just got to take what we got, right? And not complain and just appreciate it when we can.
That's right. It's very deceiving because you get a day like that and you think, okay, it's going to be warming up from now until spring, but I mean, we're really not out of the frost scare until May. So we got a long way to go still.
We certainly do. Yeah. Yeah. Gotta keep the coats out and the sweatshirts and
the plants in.
But, one of the things that has been really on people's minds up in this area has been that horrible train derailment that occurred up in East Palestine, Ohio. And so we wanted to try to give out some information and help our listeners in the local area understand a little bit more about what's going on and what they should and shouldn't worry about. And also help people who are outside of the area also get a little bit better understanding so that they don't have to deal with the rumor mill that is social media and for their information.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's a horrible thing that happened. I know a lot of communities do drills where various agencies work together. I've been a part of something. It was a few years back, but with EMA, with the health department, sometimes the hospitals come into play, and then we kind of run through these scenarios to keep everybody at least know who to contact, first steps on how to proceed with this, and more importantly, what not to do in certain situations. And these things, as we saw, can just happen, right?
Yeah. And when you practice these emergency plans, it really helps to make sure things run more smoothly. Just like, you're supposed to be practicing fire plans for your own home and, pretend that there's a fire alarm going off and you got to get out of the house and, practice getting the kids, getting your pets. And so that way, when the emergency does occur, if it does occur, you don't panic and lose precious time to be able to get yourself and your loved ones to safety. So these plans are in place I don't know if there's a community out there that doesn't have an emergency management plan. I know our emergency management agency, there's a lot of moving parts and they do drills all the time to practice for random different emergencies. So definitely a big call out to emergency management people who have to deal with these things head on and know who to contact and get everything rolling properly. They have a really important job, but no one really pays attention to them unless something goes wrong. So, so thanks to all you out there who work in the emergency response system. It's a really big, important deal. And I know for us in Extension, if there's livestock or other things like that, hopefully we're on that call list in certain areas. I know with the bovine emergency response system, we do trainings to help people understand, okay, if there is cattle escaped on the highway, what do you do? How do you manage it? If you have to put one down, here's the proper steps to do it, because we've all seen those horrible videos online of, just police officers shooting randomly at a cow because they don't know what to do. And they're really big animals and they're scary when you don't understand them. And so the animal is scared, the officer is scared, and it's just not a good situation. And so being exposed to what do you do if there's livestock out on the highway, if there was an accident with a livestock trailer or something like that, what do you do? Those are really good things to practice as well.
I know something else that kind of pops up as far as some drills that we do and we talk about is flooding, right? I mean, a
Oh,
flooding
yeah.
is an emergency event. There's obviously certain safety guidelines as far as food safety goes in the ag sector that we can educate people. We can answer questions from producers and we can give people the best way to mitigate problems. In this case, it's more of a foodborne illness type of scenario with agriculture. And we've talked about this on the show. We talked about floodwaters with hay, floodwaters with produce, the steps you need to take, the differences between crops that grow on the ground versus up in a tree that don't get hit with the floodwater, and just certain precautions to keep in mind when you are eating or selling that produce. Just risk assessment type of decisions.
Yeah, and when you're looking at a farm with livestock, you need to consider your livestock as part of your emergency response plan. And so if you are in a situation where you have to evacuate. We see this all the time down in Texas and Florida, where, a hurricane's coming and people have to evacuate and they have animals. And it's a question of what is your emergency plan for that livestock? Are you going to load them up? Do you have a trailer available? Is there someone you can call? Do you have a pasture that's up on a higher elevation that you can put them at? You need to think about, how is your farm prepared to respond to an emergency? You need to think about fire. So if you have a barn and it is your catch-all storage area and you have a lot of your farm chemicals in there, pesticides or fuels, things like that, hydraulic oil, whatever, and you also have livestock in there, if there's a fire, that's going to be catastrophic to you and your farm and, of course, the animals. So, having a safe place to store combustible materials is really important. Get that fire cabinet, make sure it's locked up, and also keep a listing of all of your chemicals that you have on your farm away from where you store them, so that when the fire department does come, you can say, here's a list of my safety data sheets. These are all the chemicals that are in the area that is currently on fire. And that helps, A, protect those firefighters, and B, it helps to them to better react to the situation. Even better if you can, when you're on the phone with 911, to let them know what those firefighters are coming into. They may need to bring special equipment, a special response vehicle, things like that. You have to give as much information as possible to your emergency response teams so that they can best react. We have hay in there. Hay fires are really devastating because they seem to combust all at once, right? But we know that you can monitor, you get a temperature probe, especially if you had to put hay up in a wet situation last year. Keep monitoring that hay. And if there is a raise in temperature, be really careful. And once it gets to a certain point, that's when you're going to okay, I need to call the fire department in before I start moving this hay around, because exposing it to oxygen could cause it to spontaneously combust, right? So have a plan, know what the potential risks are, and protect your family and your farm.
Yeah, and if that's something that you're worried about as far as baling with too high moisture, get a moisture probe and just use that
Oh,
in your
yeah.
operation. Figure out, where am I bailing at right now? And also just consider, if you're up on a ridge, you're bailing this field. Let's say the field slopes down, like towards a valley, and up on the top of the ridge, the moisture levels are a little bit higher than you would like, little 20 plus percent, let's say for round bales. And as you bale that field, remember, the moisture is gonna increase as you go down. So think ahead, mitigate some problems, and do what you can to prevent something like that.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about how and why those moisture percentages would be higher as you go down the hill. As it goes up the hill, air is going to condense. And that's why on the storm side of the hill, you're going to have more rain than you will on the side after the storm hits, because of that it's called a rain shadow. And so basically, as the air moves up the hill, it condenses and pushes all of the heavy moisture out of the clouds or out of just the air if it's humid. And you get to the other side of that hill where the wind is, going across the top. And the other side of that hill, there it expands again and can absorb moisture out of the air. So when you're looking at that rain shadow effect, depending on which direction the storm is coming from, can really change the microclimate of that hillside. And at the bottom in those valleys where you see that haze gather in early mornings, where you see that mist that will rise up out of the mountains, it's one of my favorite parts of West Virginia, is watching the mist come up off the mountains in the morning. But those heavier air and the heavier what am I trying to say? The heavier molecules will
the
collect
denser,
and gather in
yeah.
those valleys.
Yeah, so cooler air is denser, and it kind of sits on a lower elevation than warmer air. So you got to think of it this way too. Like when you have wind dries things really good. So when you have a slope, especially if it's in a valley, it's not getting that much wind. Typically, it's going to collect more moisture. The air is going to be cooler, and that air is going to roll down because it's going to be denser than the air above it anyway. So you're going to find that normally you're going to have a higher humidity in lower valleys than you do up on ridges. And that's pretty much year round. I don't think there is a time of the year where that's not the case.
Nope, it's pretty standard.
Unless it's raining.
With this horrific accident, one of the things that people are worried about is that plume of VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, that is up in the atmosphere and spreading out over the area. And so people are worried that, is my air going to be safe to breathe and things like that. And so we just wanted to let you know that on the West Virginia side, at least, and it's the same in Ohio, but I know more about West Virginia because that's where I am. But the DEP has a Division of Air Quality, and they have multiple air monitors that are constantly monitoring the air quality. And so with that, none of them have shown any indication of issues associated with the derailment. So from air toxics perspective, which would be your VOCs, they're not really anything to worry about. And you can actually go online yourself and find this information from the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. So it's dep.wv.gov. And you can go on to their air monitoring section and you can get the current air quality index. And you'll go on there and you'll find that there are several reported. So Weirton, which would be the closest in West Virginia to where this happened. So it is showing right now, or as of Wednesday, February 15th, because it's a little behind on their website. It shows the air quality as good, with some particulate matter being observed. So if you're concerned about particulate matter, let's say if you have severe asthma or CPD or some other breathing issue, grab that COVID mask and put it on when you're outside, and that's going to help reduce any problems with particulate matter. Now, once you get down to Moundsville, their air quality on Wednesday was moderate, and they had some particulate matter. So again, grab that COVID mask, and that's going to help reduce. And now, for people who have good, strong, healthy lungs, it's not as much of an issue. But for people who are sensitive, then they may need to do something like that. So it's typically only a health concern for people who are unusually sensitive to air pollution. So, and that was for Moundsville on Wednesday.
And another good source for that kind of information is your local weather forecast.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys will go into air quality. They'll go into, obviously, the temperature and the precipitation, but they also talk about air quality. So, if you find yourself being a person that's sensitive to that, to those particulates in the air and lower air qualities, then take a good precaution. Just figure out what you're going to do that day. Maybe that's not the day that you go for a long walk.
You go for a run.
Or
yeah.
Or a run.
But yeah, and you think about, I don't want our listeners to think that, all particulate matter in the air is evil and bad, because, the most common particulate matter in the air is dust, and just soil particles blowing around, and there's also pollen is a particulate matter. So as we get into the time, like all the red maples are in full flower right now and spreading their pollen everywhere. So, we're going to start seeing those type of spring reactions, and that spring particulate matter is going to go up. So we're going to see that naturally as our plants start to wake up and go into bloom. So unfortunately, it's February, not March or April, but hey, it's, I guess, great for maple syrup if it gets cold again.
And you know what, Karen? Just because just because it's natural doesn't mean it's mean. And because I'll tell you what, when the evergreens, when they start like when
It's
that
rough.
pollen's going everywhere and your car's yellow from parking underneath evergreens, especially I'm trying to think that the spruces, man, they produce a lot of pollen. Like that will really affect me. But yeah,
Yeah.
so again, reacting to just particulates in the atmosphere. But hey, I'm at the EPA website right now, just kind of looking at their definition of volatile organic compounds. It's always good to know the proper definition of things when we discuss them. So I'm just going to kind of read a little bit on volatile organic compounds so we can kind of get a better idea of what they are and what they're present in. So it says volatile organic compounds, this is from the EPA, are compounds that have high vapor pressure and low water solubility. Many VOCs are human made chemicals that are used to produce manufactured paints, pharmaceuticals, refrigerants. It says that they're also found in petroleum fuels, hydraulic fuels, paint thinners, dry cleaning agents. So they're not necessarily a friendly thing, but they are things that are pretty common around our life. One of the things that they do talk about, like in this EPA article, is that whenever you're talking about gases, and we alluded to this a little bit, but a lot of times, if it's in an enclosed environment, it could be worse because it just doesn't dissipate as readily. So, one of the things that I guess, if you're close to to the to the accident that just happened in East Palestine, maybe ventilating a little bit, especially now that it's kind of post accident, might be a better thing to do to kind of get some of those things out, because you don't want to trap those VOCs inside either. So just kind of keep that in mind. A lot of times with those compounds, they all volatile, so they will evaporate. So ventilation is very good as far as ways to get rid of VOCs. One of the ones we were talking about before was in manures, right? So if you're working in a barn and you have a lot of manures, methane is the type of VOCs, and that can start accumulating too. So it can displace the oxygen and cause sometimes very bad things. When you're in a pit without oxygen, tragic things can happen, and they have. So ventilation is very important in those situations, but just good to understand some of the chemical properties of these compounds so that you're not thinking you're doing a good thing, but just kind of keeping it in a worse state.
Yeah, so ventilation is important. And now this is more important again if you are close to the site. As you get further away, the chemical will dilute. So, dilution isn't necessarily the solution to pollution, but it does help when you're looking at health risks. So, as these chemicals spread out and become less concentrated, your exposure to them is going to be diminished. Now, the question is going to be how long are these things going to hang out in the air? And that's something we really don't know yet. But we are going to be monitoring that. Well, not we, but the Department of Environmental Protection, the EPA, and everyone are going to be monitoring the air quality for the surrounding area. They're watching it very closely. So it is really important that if you are not feeling well, or if your animals are acting poorly after, say, this big rain cloud that came through, And if you're noticing unusual behavior in your livestock or your pets, or you're feeling bad, please reach out to your doctor or your veterinarian for assistance and guidance. So if you have an animal that has died, now to date, there have not been any reported livestock deaths to the Department of Agriculture in Ohio. So all those rumors that you're seeing online about, massive livestock deaths, it's not true. There have not been any reported as a result of this accident to the Department of Agriculture. So if you do see your animals not acting right, reach out to your vet, get them tested, and monitor. And also, if you have a well, or say you have a pond that your livestock drink out of, make sure you're reaching out to the EPA and get that tested. So if you want to contact for air or water quality testing where you are, you're going to reach out to 330-849-3919. Once again, it's for air quality and water testing with the EPA, 330-849-3919.
And I just want to add something there. If you're using a well for drinking water, you can go through your health department.
Yes.
And a lot of times those services are quicker, cheaper than actually having them tested yourself. There are services by the health department for drinking water, but you can always test the water for livestock consumption as well. And, we do it through our soil testing services. They can also test for livestock water. There's a package for that. It's not incredibly expensive, but, you think about quality of water, when we talked about the importance of quality of water to livestock. So whether it's an emergency situation or just something you want to do just for good ag practices, it will increase the rate of gain and the health of your livestock. So in the long term, not only is it going to keep the livestock healthier, it'll also give you more profits because of that fact.
Right. And you mentioned something really important in that some of these tests can get expensive, and you said cheap. But do keep in mind that after every emergency, there are always those who will come out to prey on you. And so you want to make sure, if you are contacted by someone about cleaning up your farm or your home or anything, you want to make sure you document everything before testing or a possible cleanup. You want to be cautious if a company offers to clean up your property, that they have documented evidence from the local EMA of the need for that cleanup, or you are going to probably be on the hook for that cleanup cost if no contamination has been proved. So you need to get the soil tested if they want to start trying to ameliorate soil or anything. Now, in the area where the fire occurred and the crash occurred, they are collecting that soil and getting it out of there. So they're taking out all of the poisoned soil and removing it from the site. And they're also working on that Sulphur Creek to get it cleaned up. But right now, that is the only place where there is currently problems being observed. There have been some chemicals found in the river, but every water testing and water processing facility has steps in place. All along the Ohio River, they monitor that river water 3 times a day, every day. And that's just normal operating procedure. So they have steps in place to catch anything that might be coming down river, from Westview Water up in PA all the way down to Paducah, Kentucky. So they all share test results so that the people at the bottom of the river, they know exactly what's coming down. And they all have an option to have an alternate water source. They close that river intake whenever that water contamination is too high, and they get a water source from elsewhere. And so whenever that first plume came through of the higher chemicals with the fire retardant chemicals and everything that were used, as that went by, they closed off those river intakes, used their alternate water source, and then they reopened them after water quality was to a level that they felt was safe again. But also keep in mind that they have an enhanced treatment system that they can use, where they have an oxidizer and they put activated carbon in their system. And they use this to absorb and remove any potential contaminants before the water ever comes out of your tap. So they haven't seen anything locally in the river since last week. So, for a water perspective, we're fine. Now, what you want to pay attention to is, like we said, if you have an open water source, a pond or something that you're using for your livestock, you do want to continue to monitor that if you are close to that site. Also, of course, if you're local, check your wells, that we are recommending that as well.
Yeah.
And if you have questions, reach out to someone, reach out to your emergency management agency, your local extension office, the EPA, your DEP. There's a lot of people out there that their whole focus is there to help people. And, people don't go into these types of professions because they want to become part of some big crazy government conspiracy to hide information from people. We're all scientists. We love sharing information. That's like our passion in life, is like, oh, look, we have data. Look at the data we have. Woo! So please, feel like you can trust these people, because they are just trying to do the right thing and to help you. So ask questions, ask lots of questions. The more questions you ask, the better you understand what's going on.
That's right. And so listen to those agencies, realize that those agencies are looking out for what's best for the community. And that's why they're in place. We're humans. Sometimes you just feel uneasy about things, right? For no scientific reason.
This is true.
And there are other things you can do. Like if you don't want to plant something like close to the site that, that this accident happened, as an example, well, then, figure out ways you can do that. Container gardens are a great way to do that. I'm not saying you need to do this. I would say listen to the EPA, listen to ODA, let them guide your decision. But if you're just uneasy and this is something you want to do, well, those are options that you can still garden and feel a little bit better about it. It's kind of like fences. There are fences that have shown to be very good and work well to keep in livestock. But if it's keeping you up at night, you just go with a little bit more just for your own well-being and just.
There's something to be said for a calm state of mind. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes, your peace of mind. So you go with a heavier duty fence, you just feel better that you have a stronger fence. That's just, maybe it's a visual thing, but there are things that, make yourself listen to those agencies and just figure out ways that you can keep doing the things that you enjoy doing. The important thing is, we don't have a whole lot of time in a lifetime, if you look at time in general. So, find ways that you can do things with a peace of mind and enjoy it.
Right. And just to wrap it up, just to say again, the ODA, or the Ohio Department of Agriculture, is assuring Ohioans its food supply is safe and the risk to livestock remains low following the East Palestine derailment. The ODA has not received any official reports regarding the wellness of animals related to the incident. And as the Ohio EPA and area agencies continue to monitor the air and water quality, the ODA is ready to assist as needed. If you notice any unusual behavior in your livestock or domestic pet, please contact your local veterinarian for further guidance.
That's right. That's right.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.